Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run services at MedComms, and the associated websites. So you'll find lots of activities, information, resources, and so on freely available for the people who work in and around the global MedComms community marketplace, by which I mean people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, the associated businesses, and so on. You'll also find lots of information for people who want to know more about the business and maybe want to join us as a medical writer, account manager, whatever. So lots of information about career opportunities if you go to firstmedcommsjob.com. We're doing lots of videos. I've been doing webinars for a long time now. The videos are all collected together at NetworkPharma TV. So there's 400 going on 500 videos there now. So there's lots of good content. So if you haven't had a look around, please do go and have a look. And always contact me if you want any more information about what we're up to. These webinars are great because we can involve people from all over the world. We've got a great international audience again today, a big audience today, which is great. But I've got three guys here from the CCC over in the US, where I know it's quite early. So thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be talking about copyright and how what we need to know about in medical communication specifically. But I think I'm going to hand over to Chloe to pick us off with a presentation, and then we'll follow with a Q&A. Over to you, Chloe.
Great, thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe Duchesne. I work in the education department here at Copyright Clearance Center, often referred to as CCC, as Peter mentioned. And I'm really glad you guys have joined us today. Before we get started, I just want to say that this is an educational session, so this presentation does not constitute legal advice, and none of us are lawyers. Joining me today are my colleagues, Brian and Aaron. You guys want to say hello?
Welcome, everybody. My name is Brian Good. I've been with CCC for 9 years, focused on our services that offer sort of the pay-per-use permissions licenses that many of you need. We've been focusing a lot the last few years on the MedComms community. I've had the pleasure of working with probably some of you directly in some of our various workshops and other communications. So look forward to being with you again today. Aaron?
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Reed. I'm a senior product manager at CCC. I've been with CCC for 7 years now, and I'm responsible for the transactional services, and that includes Marketplace, CCC's e-commerce platform. And at the end of the presentation today, I will be doing a quick demo to show you the new medical communications project that we launched on Marketplace a few months back. So Chloe, back over to you.
Great. Thanks, guys. All right. So first, just a little background for any of you unfamiliar with CCC. CCC is a not-for-profit organization founded in 1978 to help make copyright work when the 1976 Copyright Act went into effect in the United States. So we are a global leader in content licensing and content and knowledge management. CCC is deeply involved in the pharmaceutical and life science community, as well as the scientific, medical, technical publishing industry, which provides us with the expertise to deliver permissions and licensing solutions. So in short, we make it easier for people in various industries around the world to use copyrighted material. Here is our agenda for today's session. We'll start by reviewing some day-to-day challenges that we all face. Then we'll get into the bulk of the presentation with some copyright basics. After that, Brian will take us through some common copyright compliance questions that impact the medical communications industry. And then before the Q&A, like Aaron mentioned, he will share an overview of CCC's Marketplace functionality, which will help you all secure and manage permissions requests on behalf of your clients. Gaining a solid foundation in copyright basics will help you explain to your clients the need for permissions. But before we dive in, let's look at some common challenges related to the use of content. First, technology has made a massive amount of content available from a variety of sources, such as print and electronic subscriptions, document delivery companies, various internet sites, and social media. There's so much information out there. It's easy to get and very easy to share. People forward emails, they store copies of articles on their desktop, download content to share, and tons of other things. It's simply not possible to monitor and control how every employee across the company accesses and shares content with internal and external contacts. But just because it's easy to share that content doesn't mean it's okay to do so without securing permission. Another challenge is that with the abundance of content available in many different formats, people often struggle to know when and how to secure permissions. When managing a MedComm project, content may have been pulled from a website, a conference poster, or a slide deck, and all of these reuse scenarios can raise copyright concerns. Now, most people are acting in good faith, right? They're not knowingly violating copyright law when they include copyrighted materials like that, but the reality is it happens. MedComm professionals and their clients are busy and they need information when they need it. Copyright compliance can be forgotten when procuring or using content under those tight deadlines. Often, users might not understand that what they're doing might be copyright infringement. Many times, this lack of copyright knowledge means the MedComm professional is asked to quickly secure permissions or risk the presenter or author using content without the necessary permissions. So copyright education is really key. Even a basic understanding can help avoid potential oversights and encourage your clients to build in the necessary time to secure permissions. So let's get into it. Here's some copyright basics. The ability to access and share reliable, vetted content is key to a successful medical communications project. Although sometimes difficult to explain the process and costs associated with the reuse of content to clients, it's important to recognize that it's not enough to simply acknowledge the content creator by including attribution or a citation when reusing content. In most cases, you must secure permission to use that copyrighted content. The purpose of copyright is to promote progress, primarily through the creation and distribution of original works. Copyright does this by providing an economic incentive for bringing works to life, while also limiting the time during which copyright owners can take advantage of those incentives. It also provides a set of rights and exceptions that aim to strike a good balance in practice. So, what is copyright then? Well, copyright protects original works of authorship. And what that actually means is simpler than it might sound. Original here means that something is independently created and sufficiently creative. The threshold for creativity is very low, though. It just means that there must be a spark or a modicum of something creative. It doesn't require that something be attractive or especially pleasing to the eye or ear. And works in this context are simply creative expressions. Books, songs, sculptures, photographs, drawings, and things like that, all considered works in this context. An important principle of copyright is that the rights holder of a work has the right to authorize or prohibit certain uses of their work. In copyright law, these are known as exclusive rights, and they can include the right to copy, distribute, publicly display, publicly perform, and make works based on the original work. The rights holder also sets the conditions for how the content can be used in most cases. Different uses of a work correspond to different rights, which means the rights holder can make different decisions based on the specific permission requested. Now let's take a look at some works that are protected and some works that are not. Beginning on the left with the two types most often applicable to medical communications. Original works protectable by copyright include, first, written works of any kind. So as soon as it's written down, it's protected by copyright. And in addition to the more obvious works like journals, articles, and books, email, social media posts, and everything you post online is automatically protected by copyright as long as it's original. Copyright protects online materials the same way it protects other works. There is no implied free license to take online works and reuse them without permission. And social media is protected the same way. Images, including illustrations, photographs, infographics, technical drawings, things key to your projects, are all protected as well. And Brian will go into more detail about the reuse of visual abstracts during his part. Music is protected, both the lyrics and the score, as well as sound recordings, audio files, and movies. So while this isn't an exhaustive list, it does cover most items that you're likely to run into and gives you an idea of the similar items that may also be protected. Now, on the right side of the slide, you'll see the things that are not protected. First, works not in a fixed and tangible form. So, if your idea only exists in your head or maybe in a conversation, that can't be protected. But ideas and concepts themselves are also not protected by copyright. Processes, systems, and discovery are not protected either. Facts and data are not protected by copyright because, by definition, they're merely facts and not creative output. However, we are talking about raw data here. So you can take that raw data and reuse it as needed, though there may be contractual limits depending on how you got access to that data. So in practice, what does that mean? A little example for you. Let's say you're looking for research on kidney cancer and find an article in a medical journal that explains how a certain type of drug is effective 75% of the time in managing a certain symptom. Well, copyright law wouldn't stop you from using the information to decide whether to prescribe the drug, or even from telling your colleagues that you learned about an article that says this drug has a 75% effectiveness rate. But what you could not do without permission is copy the article and hand it out to colleagues, or copy and paste large portions of the article to put on your intranet, or print out copies to hand out to potential clients or customers at a medical conference. So data can get tricky. In addition, facts such as phone numbers, URLs, and addresses are also not protected. Titles, names, and slogans are usually not protected by copyright law because they're considered unprotectable short words or phrases, but they can be protected by other types of intellectual property law. So what about logos and designs? Well, trademark law can protect those if a customer associates them with a brand, like the Nike swoosh or like check mark, for example. An interesting thing about logos, though, is that they can actually be protected by both copyright law and trademark law. If a consumer associates the logo with a brand, trademark law comes into play. If the logo is sufficiently creative, copyright law can protect it. But these are two totally different laws and standards, so to be clear, not all logos are protectable by copyright. And then the last item here is a simple list. So something like a common recipe or maybe your weekend to-do list, generic things like that can't be protected either. So this can be a good reference slide. Sharing content in a multinational environment is essential for all of us to operate. Interestingly, though, there is no one international copyright law. Instead, each country has its own copyright laws and requirements. There are, however, several international treaties that cover copyright law, and the broadest of these is the Berne Convention. The Berne Convention covers several basic copyright concepts, like types of rights, and prohibits what are called formalities, which are basically technical requirements that must be met before copyright protection is allowed. While the various international treaties and the implementing laws can be pretty complex, there are three principles that they all have in common. The first is territoriality, meaning that each country is responsible for law governing uses in your own country. The second is national treatment, and this states that you must treat foreign works and foreign rights holders no less well than your own works and your own rights holders. And the third is minimum protection. So whatever the treaty states is the minimum standard for protection. Now we'll look at copyrights in different countries. Different countries have different approaches to copyright, with some countries focused more on the author's inherent relationship to the work and others focused more on the monetary component. This means that there are two essential models for copyright protection: economic and moral. For the economic rights model, copyright law grants exclusive rights to authorize or prohibit certain uses of copyrighted works. The word exclusive here is intended to mean that the rights owner can decide who, when, where, and under what conditions their work can be used. And works can be used in many ways. They can be copied, distributed, publicly performed, and many more. All of these uses are covered by economic rights, which means the copyright owners buy, sell, and license a copyrighted work as if it were a piece of tangible property. Now, moral rights, on the other hand, refer to the notion that a copyrighted work is an expression of the personality and the humanity of its author and or creator. Therefore, there are certain things that are just right to protect about a work. And there are a number of moral rights that belong to the original creator. These include the right to claim authorship of a work, the right to demand attribution, or the right to demand attribution not be given, the right of integrity, meaning the right to forbid alteration or distortion of a work, and the right to first publication. Keep in mind that the creator cannot always transfer these moral rights to a third party. unlike economic rights, which can be sold or transferred to someone else. As you've likely discovered in your work, rights holders are not often the creator or the author for the works of the rights that they hold. Also to note here, in some countries, moral rights do not expire, while economic rights do. Both the economic rights and moral rights perspectives are found in copyright law around the world, although in different degrees from country to country. So for the purposes of our discussion today, they can be divided into two general approaches. Let's start with the continental approach on the left. This is also called the moral rights theory of copyright. This approach is founded on the notion that human creations are an expression of the human personality, and as such belong without compromise to the creator of the work, who can then choose to allow or prohibit others to use their creations. So there is no transfer of rights from the author. This means that the author needs to be mentioned in connection with the work, or attribution needs to be paid. And then there's the Anglo-American approach, also called the economic theory of copyright. And that says that there's a deal between society and creators. Society provides a limited exclusivity to the creator, specifically translatable into money, as an incentive for the creator to create. Researchers, authors, and presenters who create the content that we need to do our jobs must be compensated for the work that they do. And that's when economic theory comes into play. Economic theory exists in pretty much all countries to a greater or lesser extent, seeking to create a balance between the needs of users to access content and the needs of rights holders to be compensated. In addition to rights, copyright law provides a variety of exceptions and limitations that allow some uses of content without asking for permission from the rights holder. The most well-known of these is fair use, or the similar concept of fair dealing in some countries abroad. Fair use and fair dealing often come up in areas like research, private study, criticism, or review. However, and this is especially important for MedComms professionals, exceptions and limitations established in fair use and fair dealing do not cover reuse of content by private companies for business purposes that compete with the market for the original works. So you always want to check with your editorial department or your legal team if you think that what you're doing with content is fair use or fair dealing, because that can be slippery slope. Now we'll look at some licensing options and how those vary. There are different methods around the world for copyright, but they're often put into two license groups: voluntary and statutory licensing. Voluntary systems mean that both sides, the copyright holders and the users, have the right to decide if they want to participate. There are two categories that these licenses fall into. First is a repertory license. This is usually a subscription fee for multiple uses within the scope of the license for a set period, often a year, as an annual license. Any publisher can join and they can decide what titles they want to include in the license. There is flexibility in repertory licenses, but most of these licenses are for internal use only, which is an important consideration as most content reuse for medical communications projects is external. The second kind of voluntary licensing is a transactional license. This type of license is pay per use. So in this model, you request permission for a specific piece of content and you specify how you want to reuse it. The rights holder sets a price, you pay for the license, and then you move on. And Aaron will go over this a little bit more when he walks us through his demo on Marketplace. And there's also statutory licensing. In that case, there is a law that requires all rights holders and their works used in the country that has the law be part of the license. This is mandatory licensing, meaning that rights holders have no choice about whether their works are included, and users have no ability to negotiate certain terms. If required, countries will have a selection of licenses to choose from that fall into two groups. First is a blanket license, in which all rights holder works are covered and all users must pay. Or you may encounter a machine or media levy tax, which is a tax on equipment that can reproduce copyrighted works. Depending on the country and the type of work and use, there are different types of organizations that administer these licenses. Often called collective management organizations or CMOs, These entities gather rights and license them to users without users having to go to each rights holder individually, which could take a very long time if you're using a lot of works. CCC works with a variety of CMOs worldwide, obtaining rights to share with licensees based on certain conditions. This way, CCC is able to provide a large number of publications in our licenses. So now that you've heard a little bit about the treaties, the approaches, and types of licenses around the world, I want to reiterate the most important takeaway from this section, which is there is no international copyright law. Sharing content globally with clients or colleagues or prospects must be thought through with the appropriate considerations to avoid copyright infringement. So, what is copyright infringement? Copyright infringement is the use of copyrighted material in a manner that violates the copyright holder's exclusive right. And avoiding copyright infringement is what it all really comes down to. There can be significant penalties and consequences when a company is successfully sued for infringement. On top of monetary damages and injunctions against future use, copyright infringement can even carry criminal liability in the most extreme cases. And there are infringement cases happening regularly, even if it's not always in the news or on the front page. Many cases are settled out of court. But if and when a copyright infringement case is made public, it can also come with a serious lack of reputation. Especially in today's world of social media and 24/7 news, companies certainly don't want their name out there being associated with infringement. So, what can you do to help navigate the complexities of copyright? Well, in addition to seeking out basic copyright education, as you've all done here today, you can also appoint a copyright expert in your organization to help answer employee questions, a go-to person. It's also helpful to develop and keep updated a copyright compliance policy that's shared with employees and maybe even your clients. Copyright education is also extremely useful for employees and clients as well. Maybe it's part of your annual training. And then lastly, it's extremely beneficial to provide effective licensing and content solutions that make it easier to comply with copyright guidelines. So while our focus today is on copyright basics, we do want to touch on some common content reuse scenarios for medical communications projects. And for more in-depth discussion of MedComms use cases, please watch for CCC's upcoming training currently in development with a permissions director for a large STM publisher and an in the trenches MedComms professional. And at the end of today, we'll be sharing a link in the chat to our new CCC Solutions for Medical Communications page. All right, that's all for me for now, and I will turn it over to Brian to share today's examples.
All right, thank you, Chloe. So just want to start maybe getting into a little bit of tactical use cases here, start putting some flesh on the bones that you have to deal with maybe in securing some of these pay-per-use licenses for certain uses that might not be covered by a particular collective license. So if you've got any experience at all in copyright or in the area of securing these permissions, you know that there's just a lot of questions that you ask and the answers are, well, it depends. It depends. You should really talk to the rights holder because it depends. And that can be frustrating, but that's sort of the nature of the beast. And so one common area where this occurs is when you want to reuse figures, graphs, tables, and the questions come up about adaptation, right? So we just want to adapt this table. It can even, the question can even come up on, hey, this is my own data, or this is my client's own data. And it's just a simple table. So is this really protected by copyright? And what the key question is going to be is, well, generally, as it says here, any presentation of data is typically protected by copyright. It's eligible to be protected by copyright. Even if it's just a simple table, the real key question is going to be, has this particular representation of the data, has that been included in a piece of content that's been involved in a copyright transfer agreement that you will get into with the publisher whenever you want to publish your works, right? So if it's been covered by a copyright transfer agreement, you're probably going to need to ask permission to reuse that particular representation of the data. So then it becomes, you get into questions too. It's like, okay, well, I want to use this, but not exactly as it is. I need to change some font, some coloring, something that feels like more minor editing. rather than adaptation. On the other hand, if I do start adapting it, when do I get into the area that I can say that I've redrawn this? This is totally new. It's not an adaptation. This is a totally new thing that I've created. And that's where you get into the area of, to be really safe and make sure you're compliant, it's just always better to ask. It's always better to have a discussion with the rights holder of the figure or table that you want to use. And so we've built a lot of what we do is build tools and services to just facilitate those conversations and enable publishers, rights holders, and you to just have those conversations as quickly as possible for your timelines and move along. So one of the things that Aaron may show in his demo is, for example, even in our tool by which you can communicate to a publisher the details and try to secure a license, you can just, a good practice recently has been to forward an attachment that shows, like, we're thinking of adapting this table, this figure in this particular way. Just send it to the rights holder, let them look at it. That's really the best way to make sure that you're covered and everybody's on the same page, and the license will be good to do what you want to do. Different publishers might have different definitions of what adaptation really means. Where's the boundary between minor edits and adaptation? Where's the boundary between adaptation and this is really a new redrawn thing? It's just always better to have those conversations. Obviously, a lot of stuff that you guys do is involving conference presentations. This came up with a lot of discussion in a recent workshop that we had with MedComm folks and some of the publishers involved. And the nature of the conversation was, the more the rights holders know, the better they can quickly define and grant a license for your use. So even knowing the name of the conference, obviously, as you know, they always want to know how many people are going to see this thing. Now these days, an especially relevant question is, what's the structure or format of the event? Is this one of those dinosaurs we used to do of live events? Is this purely virtual? Is it hybrid? What does hybrid mean? And then what about sharing the content after the event? So you have a webinar, you have a presentation, are people going to be able to go download the thing, whatever? So we build into our order forms, we try to find that balance between what are the key questions that are always going to be asked. So just put it in the form, you can get it out there as quickly as possible. And then what's the best way to build tools to let conversations happen between the prospective licensee and the rights holder to fill in all the details that just aren't going to be captured in the order form. So we're trying to find that balance. It's just more information is always more helpful, honestly, to try to get these licenses quick. You're always under the gun with needing to secure a license very quickly.
Thank you, Brian. And if anyone has any additional questions regarding this slide, please feel free to get in touch with us. Now we will turn to Aaron as he takes us through a demo of CCC's Marketplace.
Okay, perfect. So now, as you can see, I'm on the landing page of Marketplace, CCC's transactional website. You can go, it's marketplace.copyright.com, so you can go to it now and you can perform a search for the content you are looking for. What we've launched on Marketplace, going back about 6 months now, is the new, I shouldn't say the new, but we also offer the medical communications project on Marketplace, just like we do on rights link permissions. However, what we built out on Marketplace is a project solution that will enable you to build out a MedComms project, add items to that project, manage the items, manage special requests within that project, to make it a little bit easier to manage everything all in one place. So I am going to switch over to our pre-production environment because I don't want to change anything in production, but it'll look exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is walk us through the workflow. So when you get to the Marketplace landing page, the first thing you'll do is perform a search. So in this case, I have a DOI that I'm going to search for because I know that this publication is set up to give me pricing results as well as special requests. So the first thing you'll see within the search results page is an exact match. It happens to be an e-journal, and this is all for demonstration purposes. But what I will do at this point is select request permission. What I'm taken to is what we call a market buyer page. Essentially, it's where you can identify how you're going to use the content and who you are as a buyer or as a customer. So for the sake of the demo today, I'm going to go ahead and select external communication. And then the next follow-up question is I represent or am a, and I'm going to choose medical communications agency. Essentially, these two questions will allow or tells us what types of use to present to you that are relevant to what you might be doing in the market. So at this point, I'm going to hit next. And on the request details page, the first thing I have to do is select type of use. So this is where the project, the medical communications project, comes into play. It's the first TOU in the dropdown. I'm going to select that. And then we present, I guess, what we call the pricing questions, or the questions that you have to answer to get a price response. So you can get a automatic price, which means you can add it to the project and check out and purchase that license. Similar to rights link permissions, you might also get a special request response. And all this means is that the publisher wants to review the request. They might ask questions. You can provide attachments. You can provide comments to the publisher. And all of this is managed and tracked within the project, which I will show. And I know Brian touched upon this briefly. But for the sake of time, let me go ahead and go through and answer the questions. So type of license, let's say medical communications agency. Portion type, what will you be reusing? Is it a text abstract? Is it the full article? Is it a figure? Let's go ahead and choose figure. Let's say 1. How will you distribute this? You can choose multiple items here. I'm just going to select printed materials and leave behinds. Adaptation needed, let's say no. Type of activity, let's say Congress satellite event, and there are multiple options here, as you can see. Translation needed, let's say no. Preferred limit of use, we have 2 options here. You can choose total audience size, and there is a range here, and depending on what you choose, then you will get a price based on that information. And there's also duration of license. Now, these questions and options, if you're familiar with rights link permissions, are the exact same questions and answer choices that we have there. So in this case, I get a price. This is test data, so this price doesn't actually mean, it doesn't represent what you might actually get. I'm going to go ahead and log in here. So at this point, if I want to proceed, I can log in, and then I'm presented with the additional questions. So the newer details, this is where the project comes into play. I can select an existing project here, or I can create a new project. So for the sake of the demo, I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. Let's just call it MedComms 1102. And then you can provide a client sponsor. You can specify the topic or product. You can put in the expected start date, and then the distribution where you will distribute the content. Now, once this project gets created, all of these answers will be saved and then pre-populated as I add items to the project. And I'm very mindful of time, so I'm going to go fast here. You can put in an order reference number if you have one. You can put in here the requesting person or organization that should appear on the license. Here we have some optional questions. If any of this information, the reused content details, is captured in the metadata, like the author or the publisher, it will get pre-populated to make it a little bit easier to proceed through these questions. And then quickly add to project. What will happen now is I'm taken directly into Manage Account. The project is created. So you can see this here. I'm in the Projects tab. The project is created. It's MedComms 1102. And all of the project level details are captured here. And I can edit these details as well. And any changes I make will carry through to all of the items. Then scrolling down to the project builder, the first tab, which is the project cart, functions exactly like a e-commerce cart should. We have the item I just added. One thing to note is that any priced item that you add to a MedComms project, that price will be locked in for 60 days. So we have messaging here around that. And then if you look down here at the bottom, you have a price expiration date of January 1st. So once it expires, you can resubmit that item. If the price hasn't changed, then that clock will start again, the 60-day clock. If I'm ready to purchase this item, I can purchase any priced items in my project. And then quickly, I just want to add an item and then I will wrap up. So adding an item takes you back to your most recent search results. For the sake of today, I'm just going to go through with the same content. You'll notice that I skipped the market buyer page because that's already set at the project level. I'm going to change this answer here to get a special request. So you see, instead of a price, I now have a special request response. These items here are pre-populated and locked because they are at the project level. If I select next, this page, the additional details page, is the same, except I can add a comment here. I want to edit the image. I know I selected video, but let's just say it was an image. And I can attach a file here. So let me quickly grab, I'll just grab this PNG. And I think I'm just fill in these required details and then add to project. Add to project will take me, first of all, we'll get a message here that lets the customer know that the publisher has been notified of the special request. I'm taken right back into the project I was in. I'm in the Open Special Request tab now, and the item is listed here and it says pending. If I go to Manage Request, here is where you can see my comment, the image I uploaded, and if the publisher has any questions for you, all of that would take place here and you can respond to those comments. If you get a priced special request, you can accept that price. And essentially what happens then is that item will have a price and it'll move, the Open Special Request item will have a price and it'll move right over to the project cart where you can purchase that. I just wanted to show you the project tab view. So within the medical communications sub-tab in projects, I can view all of my projects here. I can delete those projects and I can manage them as needed just by clicking into the project to see what items there are there. And then the purchase basically takes you through the checkout flow. You can pay by credit card or invoice. And I believe that's everything I wanted to go over. So Chloe, I think I'm going to stop share and send it back to you to wrap it up.
All right. Thank you, Brian and Aaron and everyone for your time today. We've shared a ton of information with you, obviously, and while you'll have access to the recording from today's session, we also want to encourage you to visit our new landing page for medical communications, and feel free to check that out. So now I'll turn it over to Peter and we'll get into some questions.
You've got some very interesting questions coming in. I'd still like to try and finish at the top of the hour, okay? Because that's what we promised to do, all right? But there's some quite I think there's probably some quite interesting questions coming in. What I thought I'd do is literally just hand it back to you guys. Why don't you just pick some questions you want to answer here, and make as much use as you can of the next 10 minutes for the people that are left, yeah? Chloe, why don't I just shut up? Let me hand it to you. The three of you lead the way and answer some of those questions and see whether we can cover some useful ground in the next few minutes, yeah?
Sounds great.
Well, if you don't mind, I've been kind of
Brian's
some of the ones, and we can just try to get started on some of these. Someone's brought up, the right finds and the ACL, and actually what you put in the question itself is correct already. So yes, most collective licenses, including the one we offer, the ACL, that's very good for covering purely internal uses within the organization that has that license. In some cases, also some very tight collaboration between that organization and a single, service agency. Sorry, that's working on something with them. As soon as you want to take that content outside of that scope, most likely, in most cases, you're going to need one of the pay-per-use licenses that goes beyond the collective license. So you've already put that in the question, so I think you already kind of knew the answer. So we're just confirming that. The other thing I'll just say, I'm gleaning this from some of the questions. The details of what questions do I have to answer? How much is this going to cost? Am I going to get allowed to use this or denied? We have no say in that at all. This is all coming from the individual publishers, the rights holders. We are purely in a facilitation role here. and just trying to give services and products that help speed up those conversations, since you're always under the gun there. So I think someone was asking about, why do I have to try to estimate the journal circulation? It's a great question. We are constantly working with both the licensee communities and the rights holders to update the questions that are asked to what, to some that are more relevant, make sense, are actionable. So there's some that we haven't gotten to yet. We've been putting a lot of focus on specifically MedComms project and some other related things. But yeah, you will occasionally run across some questions that probably could do with some updating. And then there was an adaptation related question I saw. And again, as I was mentioning before, if you talk to 6 different rights holders, 6 different publishers, you might get 6 different definitions about how much it counts as an adaptation versus a new drawing. Now, the person that put in the question put in a specific example of just basically tracing the figure and then reformatting it. I'll repeat what Chloe said at the beginning. This is not legal advice. We are not in a position to give you a black and white answer on this. I'll tell you qualitatively from years of talking with publishers and with this community, I would suspect that the vast majority of times they're going to say, if all you've done is just trace it and change some formatting, I don't think we're going to agree that that's a new creation. So if you really want to be covered, it's just always best to show the publisher, this is what we're thinking, and see where that goes. So those are some of the ones I caught just to start. I don't know if anyone else sees any others they want to jump in on, or I could pause and look more myself as well.
Just scrolling through here.
Chloe, there's a question at the very beginning about, does the creator have to specifically apply for copyright, or does it come automatically?
That is a great question, because like everything else, it does vary from country to country. So the US is one of the only countries that does require registration in order to have the right to sue for copyright infringement. So in the US, it's a little different of a situation. You kind of have to think about the content you're creating, because while you don't have to register everything you create, if you want that option to sue, then you do need to register it. But I know that's not the case abroad in all situations. So first of all, it depends on your location, and then also the kind of content you're creating, and if you want that option to protect it in the future from infringement.
I see a couple more that can jump in. This kind of repeats a little bit. Another thing that CCC has no role in defining is what is promotional and what is not promotional. That is not us. So there's a question about a use case. Does this count as promotional? I don't know. It's really, again, you're gonna have to have a conversation with that particular rights holder and see what works out. But CCC has no role of trying to define what is promotional and what is educational. And then if you have a CLA license, this question is in there. I mean, really, it's, do the terms of the CLA license, do they cover what you're trying to do? And if they do, then then you're covered. I don't know the details of what's involved in the CLA license. They're an RRO, as you know, based in the UK, so they are another RRO. But I don't know the details of what a CLA license offers, so that's something you would need to look into.
Can I just jump in? I'm now going to jump in, sorry, but questions come in a couple of times, which touches on an area that I find interesting. And I know there's going to be a limit to how far you go with this, okay? You've made it very clear. You're CCC, you're not the publishers. The publishers have control of pricing and all. But there's a couple of questions coming in, or several questions coming in around the sort of timing and so on. I'm in a MedComms agency. I'm trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. I want permission to do something, and I'm being told maybe in a couple of weeks' time I'll find out and how much it's going to be. Someone's just said here, if because of the timelines, if I've actually applied, are we covered because I've done the right thing and apply, or do I have to go through that entire process, which can drag out? And also the point that I think we should at least acknowledge is that you can be surprised at the prices. And one of the things I've talked about in the past is some of the educational projects I talked about. I was in a conversation, it's going back a bit, but we're talking about educational projects, which people wanted to do, the budget's there, but suddenly it's the repro rights. And it's like, wow, and it dwarfs the cost of the budget, and the educational project doesn't get done. Anyway, so without going off on one, and I know there's a limit to what you can say, but from your perspective, can you just talk a little bit about that? Because that's one of the practical problems that everyone in MedComms is going to have. They want to do the right thing, but the process doesn't, make it very easy. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit of, we put, yes, about the turnaround time. And we put a lot of effort in working with the rights holders on helping them increase their turnaround time or get faster. You know what I mean? There is a lot of standard language that's years and years old that you'll see in the form where they just say, we'll get back to you in 14 days, 21 days. A lot of that is outdated. I can tell you from personal experience over the last 2 or 3 years, all of the top rights holders, just about all of the top rights holders have really improved in their responsiveness for this market in particular. So they might still have that language on there, but they know, they certainly know by now that you guys are dealing with hours and days. You're not dealing with, I can wait 2 or 3 weeks. I think that's almost never the case. And they understand that too. So that's a lot of our investment in tools and services we build are about the communication between the licensee and the rights holder. How can we make that more streamlined? Being able to pass attachments back and forth, for example, being able for the rights holder to see all of their open requests at one place so they can get to them faster. They can sort by type of industry. So all the MedComms and pharma stuff comes right to the top. We have a customer service team that spends time calling the rights holder saying, I just heard from one of your clients trying to pay you money that they're waiting for you. Can you speed it up? So we have direct relationships with rights holders to try to prod. So there's just all the levers we're trying to pull to get that process faster. About the pricing, yeah, we have no role in that. But again, these rights holders, they're, for a lot of them, it's part of it's a business model. But if the order volume starts going down to zero, that's not a very good business model, and they understand that. But that's up to them. That's really up to them. We try to facilitate discussions, but that's really up. We have to keep our hands off of that.
And again, I appreciate there's a difficulty going very far with this, but just to acknowledge the fact that, if you're in a pitch situation and agency one says, we can do this project for this, with that, plus repro fees, and the other agency goes, we can do it for Y. And the client doesn't quite get all this and just goes, well, why is agency X charging so much more? And it's an unknown quantity. Procurement says, well, until we know, and you're into that sort of vicious cycle. So you've said, I heard you say several times talking about educating the clients.
Mm-hmm.
Again, practically speaking, that can be a very murky area, can't it? And I suppose this is a bit of a simplification. There's a very mixed audience here today, but let's say we're all MedComms agencies talking to you, trying to do the right thing. Just talk a little bit about, or can you talk a little bit about what you do in terms of going into pharma clients, educating them directly, or is the role of the MedComms agency to educate the pharma client sort of thing? Can you talk around that a little bit to give us a sense of what's happening, or am I being a bit unfair and a bit overly simplistic here? Because you can tell me. You see what I'm getting at, though. It's in a real life situation. Agency goes, but you've got to have all these
sure.
rights, and the client says, well, I don't want them, so I'll go with agency over there. And I just wonder whether you've got a reflection on, that scenario.
I don't want to step on Chloe's toes on anything she may offer to this. I'll just say yes. We are making more efforts to partner both with the agency customers and through both of our major channels at CCC, the transactional license services that Aaron and I have been working with, as well as the corporate, the right find and the ACL type of things. We have frequent educational discussions and seminars trying to help your clients understand the importance and the realities of copyright. Because you're right, yes, it's a real world pressure. If there's some advertising agency or something there that doesn't care about copyright and therefore their fees don't include that can be tough. But we're aware of that. And
okay, and there's a limit to what we can say, and I get all that. Just we ought to stop. But there was a question. It's cut in, and Stephanie's followed up. I started asking that question just very specifically. If they have made the application, but they are still waiting for an answer from the rights holder, are they covered if the meeting's happening tomorrow and they've been told they might not hear for 2 weeks? I assume the answer is obvious, but do you want to just answer very specifically that question?
I think, unfortunately, if you don't have a license, you don't have a license, and that's
You don't
the
have like
reality.
it is as simple as
It
that.
is. It is a pain point, and we hear, and and listen, there are, not just in the MedComms industry, but in the educational industry and in all kinds of industries, there's clients that have to make that decision, right? And they make it. A lot of them make it based on their years of history with a particular rights holder, But that is a decision that they have to make. It's like we're gonna go forward and use this, and yes, be exposed, but we think that this is, that's a decision you have to make. If you don't have a license, you don't have a license. That's why we work so hard to try to make the thing faster.
Okay. Okay, so look, I'm sorry that the technology messed up completely, and we'll address that in a minute. And sorry to the audience, I'll let you know what we're doing about that later. I think a lot of that was absolutely fascinating, and I hope we've certainly given people a lot of clues and signposts and food for thought and all the rest of it. Very importantly, I know you guys are very happy to hear from everybody. So, anybody who's on the line at the moment, follow up and talk about it. We've had several comments coming in about let's have unstructured Q&A sessions and more meetings and more this and more that and more. There's obviously an appetite here, and I'm laughing slightly in my head because a few years ago, we had a couple of meetings pre-Zoom times, as it were, and one thing led to another, and there was always lots of very lively discussion. There's obviously still lots of lively discussion that we can have, and we've said ourselves before today that there's probably going to be more stuff that we can and should do, sort of thing. And if I can facilitate that, I will. But we've also seen how wide the questions are, and my goodness me, it could take a while, and maybe it's a day's worth of Q&A or something. I think we should draw the line there. Chloe, it looks like you're going to say something, but I think we should probably let people go because they're jumping on the next team's calls. But say what you're going to say, Chloe.
I just want to say that there is a 10 common misconceptions about copyright handout available on the link that we're sharing for our CCC Medical Communications page. And to get in touch with anyone, you can email me, education@copyright.com, and I can point you in the right direction. We have tons of people, smart people here that can help you guys out.
Okay. Sorry, I have to go. Sorry, we all have to go. Right. Can we answer? I'm gonna have to draw the line, guys, here on this one. So I know this is leaving some people quite frustrated, not least myself. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Apologize again for maybe things going a little bit haywire. Panelists, I'll see you in a moment in our little meeting room. We'll have a chat. All the audience members, as we're all saying, please follow up and have a think and let me know what you think about what else we could do that would be useful to help people. Okay.